Yeah.
And I just needed something to do and logged into a chat room. And apparently that same night you decided to log into a chat room.
Yep. This is the Apparently Autistic podcast,
where we unmask the spectrum
with real voices
and real experiences.
We're your hosts, Keith Holloway
and Bridget Holloway.
And I am apparently autistic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder. We're not experts in anything except our own personal experiences and perspectives.
Be sure to check out the important disclaimers and disclosures in the show notes.
Now let's dive in. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Apparently Autistic podcast.
Yeah, welcome.
What are we on, 7 now?
I don't know. I've lost track. That sounds about right.
We're going to eventually have to just say, hey, what's up? Anyways, we're your hosts, Keith Holloway.
And Bridget.
Anything before we get into this episode? Merch store. I added some more stuff since last episode, so check that out. Again, I don't care if you buy it. Just check it out. It's funny.
It's kind of just a fun little thing for you to do in your spare time.
Okay, so this episode is an interview of Bridget, my neuroanchor. I think we're calling it My Neuroanchor, a Spouse's Perspective or something like that. So,
okay.
Should we just jump right into it?
Sure. I
get going.
Hope I can do it justice, but here we go.
Okay, so just give everybody like a quick background of you.
Okay.
It's going to be rough.
I love talking about myself. No, I grew up in the country, rural town, about 2,000 people. There were more cows than people. That was kind of always like the claim to fame. The other claim to fame is that my mom went to the same high school as Napoleon Dynamite, and I grew up about 10 minutes from there. So
their depiction of that area is 100% spot on.
Yes, it's pretty accurate for the area. A farming community, small town, everybody knows everybody kind of area of like one small town grocery store and a couple gas stations. You have to drive 30 minutes to get to any somewhat major city that's not really a major city.
Yeah.
But, you know.
This is in northern Utah, pretty much on the border of Idaho.
Yep.
Preston, Idaho is where Napoleon Dynamite took place, and it's where your mom went to high school.
Yeah. So, I don't know, pretty basic life growing up. I had 3 sisters and my parents.
This is a very sheltered valley.
Yeah.
That it's in, Cache Valley. There are a lot of people that just have never left that valley, and it's a whole different world.
And my parents were both those people. Like, grew up in a very small house, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom with 6 people. And we just never knew any different. That's just the way it was.
6 people, 5 of them women.
Yeah.
So one bathroom with 5 women. Yeah.
Yeah. But
your dad was a saint.
He definitely was. He never complained about it, though. It was just kind of the way it was. He spent a lot of years in youth group working with like the Boy Scouts. So he got kind of his taste of boys and came home and was surrounded by women all the time. So we kind of always joked about that. But that was kind of like my family dynamic. I would say it was kind of, and I don't say this in a derogatory way at all, but kind of just a boring life. Like no drama, it just kind of was the routine childhood. You play outside in the summertime,
routine playing outside. Like I've seen videos of you guys burying your little sister
in the sandbox.
Yeah. Routine stuff.
Hey, back then it was.
I watched that and I said, "Oh, I've done trainings in the fire department for how to rescue someone who was in that." Yeah.
But no, there's home videos. Like we were happy. We had everything we needed. It's just kind of a basic life. My dad worked it's kind of a funny story, but there was a sugar beet factory and he helped to when they tore it down basically. And then they built a plastics factory in the same place, and that's where he worked for the rest of his career. So overall he worked there for like 36 years, I want to say. And he met my mom there because my mom worked in the office with my grandma, who's my dad's mom, and she introduced them. So kind of a fun little side story, but no, just really like small town living, nothing super exciting. Got my first job at the local grocery store when I was 16. They called me and asked if I wanted to work, kind of thing. Like
you lived in the same house your entire life.
I did.
You moved away. Yeah,
I did. That being said, when I moved away, life got a little bit exciting. I lost track of how many times I moved in a 6-year period. It was over 30 times. I got married pretty young, had started having kids pretty young. And I mean, that situation kind of evolved and kind of shaped who I am now. Like, coming from such a boring, people who've experienced some of the things I've experienced usually had stuff going on most of their life. Yeah. And I didn't grow up in it. I just fell into it after I moved out of the house. So that's my backstory.
Yep. Now, that kind of feeds well into, for anyone who hasn't heard our story yet, we kind of talked about it a little bit in a previous episode, I think, but just kind of tell people a little bit about how we met.
Well, I was going through a divorce, like a year into a divorce, and I had sent my kids away for the weekend and was home alone and bored out of my mind, and knew that I could talk to people online, like chat rooms were a big thing back then. So I logged into a chat room just to pass the time because I missed my kids and I needed something to distract my mind from it. So I logged into a chat room and just started talking to people. Like, I really just was living my life. I was working. I was just trying to figure out life on my own as a single mom, and lived around the corner from my parents and was bored. It was a Friday night, I think.
Yeah.
And I just needed something to do and logged into a chat room. And apparently that same night you decided to log into a chat room.
Yep.
You were apparently bored, trying to see what you could stir up. And
it was LDS chat. The funny part of that is I was no longer LDS. I had left the Mormon church.
Yeah.
The LDS church. And sometimes I would just log in to chat with people that, had the same background.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Like, we considered ourselves, and still do culturally.
Yeah.
Like, that's who we are. Like, when you grow up in that world and that's what you know culturally, and it's easier to talk to people of the same background. And that goes for any culture or any, upbringing. So even being out of it as an adult, like, that's what you knew your whole life. So it was easier for you to talk to people that understood it.
And I was also single, had been through 2 divorces.
Yep.
And had gone through the difficult time of leaving the LDS church, which I had grown up in.
Yeah.
And I had dated girls that never knew anything about the Mormon church, didn't have any history with it, as I think for a while I didn't want to have anything to do with anything connected to it.
Yeah.
And there was just nothing to connect over. They just couldn't.
Well, they didn't
relate.
understand.
They didn't understand where it came from.
Stories that you told and references that you made and who your family was. Like, you can't understand that. I mean, you can learn it over time, but you don't come into it with an understanding unless you.
And I don't think that's just unique to the LDS church.
No,
there's a lot of religions that if you grow up in a religion, particularly one that's a little more strict and more of a way of life than just something you do on Sunday, then for sure.
But that night we ended up chatting with each other. It kind of was a weird situation. I want to say it was a Friday night because we met on Friday the 13th.
Yep.
That's kind of always our thing. Friday the 13th is our lucky day. So it was Friday the 13th that we started talking.
And it was actually just after your divorce had been finalized, wasn't it?
Yes, but I don't know if I knew it at the time. I think I found out after that weekend.
Is that what it was?
It ended up that it was finalized on the 9th or something like that. Anyways, I'd been waiting for a really long time. And at that point, it was like, I guess I'll hear when I hear. Because I didn't know. It felt like at that point it was never going to happen, but we'd been separated for quite some time. But we talked that night, and then we started texting and talking more, and we pretty much talked into like the next day and over the weekend. And it was kind of a strange sequence of events, but I think I knew pretty early on that you were different. You were like, and different by way of like, okay, I'm actually interested in this guy.
Yeah.
And I was not interested in dating at all because of what I had just been through. I wanted nothing to do with dating or a relationship or anything like that. But
neither of us had gotten on there looking for someone to date.
No.
Especially since like I had met my ex-wife on there as well.
And I met my ex-husband on there.
So like we weren't exactly like, hey, let's go back and see who else we could find on here. Like we just were chatting on.
Yeah, for sure. We were just trying to pass the time, really. But we talked and chatted, and we talked on the phone and texted pretty much consistently for the next while. That was Friday the 13th of November. On Christmas Day, because I didn't have my kids for the holiday, I flew to Ohio to meet you in person for the first time. So what's that? 6 weeks later-ish. And then I flew back home on New Year's Day. So I was in Ohio for a week. Met your kids and we hung out for the week and got along really well. It was kind of cool. Then you came to Utah to meet my family the first week of February. Had a heck of a day flying out there. You I don't remember if it was a delay or a cancel or what happened to your flight.
I think it was a cancel, and then I got rebooked on a much later flight, but then there was an earlier flight that I was put on standby for. So we were hoping I got on the earlier flight.
Yeah.
But still, it was very delayed from...
Knowing what we know now, that day makes a lot of sense. But he was very, very overwhelmed by the time he got there and just wanted out of this. He was just done with airports and done with people and just wanted to go to the hotel and just chill. Originally, you had planned to get off of the plane and propose to me in the airport.
That was the plan.
But after the day you had, you just couldn't.
I just wanted to get out of there.
Yep. Which makes perfect sense. So anyways, that weekend you met my family.
That was Super Bowl weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, it would have been. And then the original plan was for me and the boys to go back to Ohio with you when you left. Yeah,
because at that point we had decided you were going to come out and live with me for a while.
Yeah, you did propose to me that day, but just not at the airport. We got back to the hotel and you had calmed down and chilled for a while and got out of airport mode. And then you asked me to marry you. And then, our plan was to have a long engagement and just get to know each other. We weren't in a hurry to get back into anything. We had both just gotten divorced and just wanted to take our time. Sequence of events that unfolded, and when we got on the plane, we actually had different flights because you had already booked your return flight and me and the kids had just a one-way flight to Ohio. I had moved out of my apartment and put everything into storage and we were leaving. There was I didn't have a car there anymore. I didn't have a job there anymore. We were moving.
And this wasn't trying to sneak out of somewhere. Everyone was aware. The boys' biological father was aware. Even said goodbye to them the night before. Yep.
And then we got on the plane. You walked us to the plane because our flight left first. And then we got on the plane and the kids, I'll have to give this because it makes a difference. They would have been 6, 4, and 1. So 3 little kids. We were in our seats, ready to go with the flight, seatbelts on. They were doing the pre-flight safety briefings. And I hear over the intercom on the airplane, I hear my name and asking me to come to the front of the plane. And I was like, that's weird. So I come to the front of the plane and they told me that the kids had to get off. And I was like, what do you mean the kids have to get off? And they said the kids cannot leave the state of Utah. Kids have to get off the plane. And I said, well, they're not getting off the plane without me. So I got off the plane too. And we went down the stairs by the jet bridge and got into a police car and they took us over to the police station so that we could figure out what we were doing. We didn't have a car at the airport. We didn't have the airport was 2 hours away from my parents' house.
Explain that he had gotten a restraining order that morning.
The judge had signed a restraining order that kept me from the kids. It kept the kids from leaving the state. So basically they told me I could leave, but the kids had to stay. Yeah. And I wasn't going to leave them there without me. So,
and that day, after I said goodbye to you guys at your gate and you got on the plane, I started walking to where my gate was going to be. And I saw 3 police officers heading towards your gate. And it just, something felt off. So I turned right back around and started walking back to your gate and realized what was going on.
Yeah.
So I just had this feeling that something was off about it.
Yeah.
We didn't have any reason to believe that he would have pulled something like that.
No, he met us and said goodbye to the kids the night before, knowing that we were leaving to go to Ohio. And then that happened. So we found a shuttle to go back to my parents' house, waited for a court date on all of that, and basically stayed with my parents for a couple weeks until court. I remember leaving court that day, and I was somewhat beside myself because I felt like it was just kind of the end. And I called you from the car and you said, what happened? And I said, I can't come to Ohio and stay with you unless we're married. And you didn't ask for this. So
I think we need to not to try to make it all drama, but the whole situation. So while all of that was going on, the other issue that we were dealing with was that while you and I were still talking, Bridget's ex was calling her nonstop, harassing her nonstop, to the point where we pulled out her phone bill and he called her 843 times in November, which added up to more than one call per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And so Bridget was actually able to obtain a stalking injunction that basically said he wasn't allowed to contact her. And in that time period, he had violated that twice.
Yep.
And the second violation is a felony. So he ended up agreeing to let you take the boys out of state if you agreed to drop the felony charge against him. And then also he threw in the whole, we can't live together unless we're married, which I've heard of that being an issue only when there's alimony involved. Because alimony, obviously the ex-husband pays alimony until the woman gets married again. Well, if she's living with someone who's supporting her, then he doesn't need that. But no, this was just because, Utah is special and has their laws that are affected by the predominant religion there. So it's basically they agreed that I couldn't live with you unless we were married, and I didn't have a job in Ohio yet, so it wasn't like I could move it there on my own and then we could just keep getting to know each other. And I said to you on the phone, I remember saying, you didn't ask for this, and I understand it. Mm-hmm. We just won't come to Ohio for now. And you said to me, and I'll never forget, you said, I married you when I put the ring on your finger. All we have to do is make it legal. Yeah. So it basically was just you saying that was my level of commitment. When I put the ring on your finger, I meant it. Yeah. And so you're like, we'll get married. And I was like, okay. So. And we even specified to the court, because I think you had to do that one more time or something, and basically said, no, she's coming out and we're getting married the very first chance we had. Yeah. So they were like, okay, that's fine. Yep. So we came out at the end of February, like at the 29th, or I guess it wouldn't be February 29th because that's not a thing unless it was leap year. Yeah. But it was like the last couple days of February, maybe it was the 27th. Anyways, which was a weekend. And then on Monday, March 1st, we got married. So from November 13th, first meeting in a chat room, to getting married on March 1st of the very next year. Mm-hmm. This is a very Mormon thing to do. If you're if anyone listening is Mormon or grew up Mormon, you're gonna that tracks. That sounds about right. So that's one of the ways we're we're still kind of culturally Mormon. Yeah. We don't recommend it. No, we tell our kids that all the time. We got pretty lucky. Looking back, we didn't know each other hardly at all. We obviously have gotten to know each other over the years being together and got pretty lucky. Years now, so. Yeah. But we just looked out. Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of how we came to be. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny, for your coworkers and stuff, we're always like, why would you get married after, such a short time? And both of us kind of had the attitude going in at the first of, we've been through this before. If we're not happy together, we can walk away. Well, yeah. And I've told people that's kind of what almost helped at the first, because we didn't have any kids together. We had both been through a divorce, and we knew that the worst part of it was, dealing with the custody and having to co-parent with an ex and all that stuff. So we knew going into it, we're like, if it doesn't end up working out, we get a divorce, we go our separate ways, and we're fine. Yeah. I mean, it would suck still, but it wouldn't be. And over the years, our mentality on that has obviously changed because we were very connected, and my kids are your kids and vice versa, and it would be but it was kind of it just helped at the initially time. But that's kind of how we started. Yep. Okay, this is going to be long if all of these answers are... Sorry. No, it's fine. We got to lay the foundation. Yep. So at what point did you start to think, Keith's brain works a little differently? I don't know. I always saw some differences, but I didn't ever attribute it to Keith's brain works differently. I kind of attributed it more to maybe you being raised, because I didn't know your parents. I didn't meet your parents till we'd been married for 7 years? Mm-hmm. But that's another story in and of itself. I kind of just attributed it to
maybe like you being raised in a really strict household, because the things that were different about you were like strict with schedules and routines and things like that. It was like...
And those were things that I was raised with too. We just know now why.
Right. And
it's a combination of things.
Right. So I kind of think I attributed it more to that than you just being different. I figured it was just the way you were used to being.
And just to clarify, the reason she didn't know my parents for many years was because again, I'd said I'd left the LDS church and I had been disowned by my family for some time.
Yeah.
After that. In fact, it wasn't until I started working for the airlines and got flight benefits that I just showed up on my parents' doorstep with my kids.
Yeah.
So,
it
took her years
Yeah.
before she actually got to meet my parents and get to know them.
Yeah. And you always talked about your parents, like told stories about childhood, and it wasn't like it was some dark secret or something that you didn't want to be part of your life. It's just kind of the situation. And I think I took it for what it was, but I also wanted to support you. I feel like I was your support person. And if you were ever ready to bring that back into our lives, then I supported you in it. And if not, then I supported you in it. Like, you're the one that had the history. So.
Okay. So be honest. At any point, did you Google, is my husband autistic?
No, I don't think I did. Like, I don't think I even suspected autism until you started talking about it. You're the one that brought it up and started going, could this be what it is? And looking into different things. And then I went, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I think the planting of that idea came from you. I don't think I came up with it.
Came from starting to think that our oldest son was autistic. And like, at the time we were thinking it was Asperger's versus autism, because it was only 2013 when those became the same thing. So I don't remember where that was, the time frame, but yeah, we were thinking about that. And then the more I started learning about that, I went, hey, this sounds real familiar.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder why.
So looking back now, what were some of the things that maybe didn't quite make sense at the time, but do now?
What we know now as meltdowns. Like, just the way that you would react to certain situations. And then, like, it was like after the situation cooled off or the meltdown was over and things had, like, you would always, like, circle back to it and process it logically. But it was like the meltdown had to get out of the way. And I didn't understand the volume or why it was happening, or, like, it felt like a short fuse or a...
And I used to say I got my anger management issue, is what I called it before, from my dad, because he did the same thing. So it was matched. So it made sense.
Yeah.
That's why we now think he's autistic.
Probably, yeah.
Pretty sure
probably autistic. Yeah.
So what was the hardest part of living with undiagnosed me? Is that pretty much?
Yeah, just not knowing what that was or how to navigate it, really, or if I don't know if so probably the hardest part in the beginning was coming from the background I did, the abusive situation, the manipulation, the control, the things like that, into those meltdowns. Is like, I was not in a mindset of I'm going to do what I did over again.
Right.
Like, I was very much I came out of that and I'm going to do better for my life and for my kids. And then little things like that pop up and it's like, okay, I mean, it feels different because it's not the same as my old situation. So obviously it's different, but how is it different? And how do we navigate this? Like, that was probably the most challenging part for me, is like, okay, my life looks different now. And I'm going to be like strong and an advocate for myself and for my kids, but what are we really dealing with?
Yeah, I think the only thing that probably helped is that meltdown. It was like there was a huge difference between my meltdown and how I was normally.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it wasn't like I was just always a hothead.
No.
I wasn't, always a jerk. It was just I'd have a meltdown and I'd get really loud. And even when I was melting down, I don't think I'm that much of a jerk necessarily. I don't know.
No, it's the delivery that people, it's context, tone, and like volume and things like that are all part of the way we communicate. So we're raised to take all those things into account. And when you're melting down, you can't take any of those things into account. You can only listen to what you're saying. What is the actual root of the problem here? And when you can filter that out, and it took me years to figure that out, everything you say when you're having a meltdown is valid. It's like, he still isn't being irrational.
Yeah.
The delivery just sucks.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's especially bad because you grew up in a very quiet, peaceful house. Like your dad never yelled.
Yeah, my dad passed away at 71.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I ever heard him yell.
Yeah. And that was not my experience with my dad.
Yeah.
So
it definitely caught me off guard. And
world, so the volume alone was probably just very foreign to you.
Yeah, my mom has MS also, and we grew up with that. She was diagnosed when she was 19, so before she had any kids. And back then there wasn't treatment for it. So one of the biggest triggers for MS is stress. Mm-hmm. So we kind of all grew up in a world where we minimized stress.
Yeah.
We just
did what you could to not stress your mom out.
Yeah. And it wasn't ever like we hid things from her. We just lived lives that were as stress-free as possible to eliminate that for her. And my dad kind of did the same thing. He wasn't going to shout or raise conflict in the house because that stressed mom out. So,
well, and like to give you a little insight on her dad too, like your dad just loved people. Mm-hmm. He accepted everybody as they were and loved them as they were. It was never, I don't like you because of this. This is who you are, and I'm going to love you how you are.
Yep.
And I don't, like he just accepted everyone. And that, I think that, you and your sisters got that too.
Yeah.
And that probably is one of my other saving graces. That's probably one of the other reasons why you stuck around is because, your dad taught you to just love people as they are. Everyone's flawed. Everyone's got their own issues. But it wasn't even like he was like, it didn't even come off as, I love you in spite of your flaws. It was just, I love you.
He just met you where you were. Yep. Like it's so funny because he was always the one that mom would be like, we have to go. Like it's when something's over, it's like, it's time to go. And he would find somebody else to talk to, and we're there for another 30 minutes, but he knew everybody and he spoke everybody. Like he had different friendships with different people. Mm-hmm. And when he was talking to someone, he spoke their language. It was like he was very like adaptable. And like you said, he just took people for who they were and kind of met them there. And their relationship was, it could look very different than his relationship with somebody else because they're not the same person.
Yep.
So.
Okay. So did you ever like feel like something was wrong, or was it just like, did you just think, okay, this is just how Keith is?
No, I just thought it was kind of just how you were.
Yeah. And it was.
And I think that more of what my mind did in those moments and those things is, gosh, is there anything we can do to help him? Mm-hmm. Like help these situations not get to this point, or help you process it in a way that isn't so stressful for you. Like it looked a lot like anxiety and like stress and overwhelm. And it still does, but knowing what it is now, it's different. But back then that's what it looked like. And I'm like, how can we get him to be like less on edge, less stressed, less anxiety ridden about this? And
well, and we kind of talked about this a little bit in a previous episode, and I even made a YouTube short about it too. Is that's the difference between you and every other relationship I had, whether it was parents, siblings, ex-spouses. Like you gave me the benefit of the doubt. It wasn't, this is a character flaw. This is something that's wrong with him. It was like you saw it from a perspective of, he's obviously not enjoying this either, or there's, he's obviously dealing with something. It was just, I don't even know really how to word it now that I'm trying to word it, but it's like,
no, I understand. And it's interesting because while you're saying that, I'm thinking of, it's kind of how we both came into our relationship, like talking to each other. Mm-hmm. We kind of just put our cards out on the table, and neither one of us was looking for a relationship. We weren't doing that dating someone new thing where you try to impress, and it was like, this is who I am, take it or leave it, because of what we had both been through. We had both
played the games and didn't feel like playing the dating game. So it was like, this is what you're working with, baggage and all. Yep. And we both had plenty of it. So like, looking back to that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. It derailed. Oh, yeah. Looking back to that, it's like in that process of
just putting all our cards out there, I realized that we're a pretty honest and genuine person. Like, there were things that you told me about situations that happened with your family and situations that happened with your exes that weren't stories that someone would tell that was trying to be like, oh, I'm never in the wrong.
Yeah.
It's like you were just honest with me about it. And I think that when it came to like your meltdowns and stuff like that early on, I knew your character and I knew that you really are you're truly a genuine person. So I kind of looked at those things differently. It wasn't like you were trying to manipulate a situation or you weren't trying to control a situation. It was, this is a genuine person that is just trying to do the best they can and has hit this point of overwhelm or,
you know. So what was your reaction when I finally said, I think I might be autistic? Or at that time, I think we were saying Asperger's at first.
Yeah, because we didn't know that it was all the same at that point. It was like kind of a big question mark, like curious. I need to know more.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't know a lot about, and at that point, my experience with autism was a lot of what the stereotypical experience is. So I was like, huh. And then I started learning more and it's like, okay, it's a spectrum. And so I'm more interested. What are we, what are the possibilities here? And, the more I learned, the more I was like, okay, this really fits.
Yeah.
At first, I didn't know enough about autism or Asperger's at the time to really be like, oh, maybe he's onto something. It was like, okay, he's saying this for a reason, but I don't know enough.
Yeah. Well, and then, it first was me, like I was trying to figure myself out and I did the whole personality types thing first and that made sense. It kind of matched, but there still felt like there was that missing element there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you remember like how you felt when I was officially diagnosed? In fact, I think I called you on the way home from my appointment and said, yep, I'm officially diagnosed.
Yeah. Really weird. And I say that and it's kind of a mixture of things. It was like a little bit of a sense of relief because I know you had been wondering about it and you had been researching it and you wanted answers. So it was like a sense of relief in that you had that piece now.
Yeah.
But a whole lot of, okay, now what? Like, is this gonna spiral into something that, like, are we gonna go down a rabbit hole and is this gonna make things worse now that we know? Is it going to help? Like, what resources are available to us? Like I said, I didn't know very much at that point. So it was like a lot of unknown. So kind of scary at the same time. But then there was that sense of relief of, okay, now we have something to actually research and something to learn about and maybe something that can help us have answers and solutions. So some confusion. And
how do you think that changed things for you, like emotionally and mentally in our relationship?
I don't think it really did.
I think by then we were pretty sure anyways.
Yeah.
So we had already started to, I think even before I really started to even suspect Asperger's or autism, I remember the one moment, and it's obviously a trait that we realized was a trait later, but it was something like where you were like, why don't you just know that? Or it was something like you wanted me to just know to do something or say something. I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, like, you can't get mad at me for something that you didn't tell me you expect. And I remember you saying, I shouldn't have to. And I said, I'm sorry, but you have to. I was like, for me, you have to. It's not that I'm trying to be a jerk. It's not that I'm trying to be neglectful or whatever. You have to with me.
Yeah.
And
you were
that
very
was something
clear
that
about
made
it.
a whole lot of more sense once we realized it was autism. Because that's
you were like, I'm really sorry. I wish I picked up on things like that, but I don't. I need you to tell me. And that was kind of the really honest conversation. And it was probably not easy for you to say, but necessary.
I think
and it
that
helped
conversation
me
changed things more than the diagnosis.
Yeah, probably.
Because again, it was, you didn't need to know I was autistic to accept that.
Yeah.
You didn't need to know I was autistic to understand that when I was melting down, that's not who I really was. Yeah. And that was the difference. Is I think there's people in my life that might be like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have done that if he was autistic, or knowing he was autistic would have made me feel differently. Well, it shouldn't.
No.
And that was the difference.
It really didn't matter to me. It was more of like getting answers for you and helping navigate things to make things easier for you. And really, overall, it helps all of us. But
it really gave us a place to look for more answers and for things that would make more sense for us.
Definitely.
Yeah. What were some of the first things that you had to unlearn or rethink after we either decided I was autistic or had been diagnosed? Maybe even things that you learned that you had to rethink once you started learning more about autism.
I would say probably just like the stereotypes, like unlearning that that's what autism looks like because it looks different for everybody, and figuring out what some of the traits and challenges and strengths and basically everything are, and figuring out how that applied to us. But I can't think of anything specific that I had to like unlearn. Yeah.
Again, I think that's the difference though, is that you like accepted me as I was, so you didn't have to go, oh, okay, this is like you understood me in a lot of ways. You just didn't know that it was the autism.
Right.
Yeah. Was there anything that you misunderstood about autism that changed once it was me that we were talking about?
Yeah, the stereotypes. The level of, I mean, because even we had our nephew that was high level, like whatever.
High support needs.
Yeah. And then I worked with somebody at one point who had a brother who had Asperger's, which is what it was at the time. And he was more like he lived on his own. I think he maybe was like in a group home or something like that. But he held a job and went to traditional school, but was obviously different in some ways. And so I'm like, okay, those are basically the two levels that I know anything about. And you kind of didn't really fit into either of those. So it was like, okay, now I've got to learn more about this because there's a lot more to it than I know.
I think, too, like some of the stereotypes come from when autism and Asperger's were considered separate things.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, definitely.
So, like, you tell people who don't understand that they're under the same umbrella now and they're considered the same thing, and, you're just diagnosed as autistic now. They're the ones that I say I'm autistic, and they're like, well, must be a minor case or stuff like that.
Right.
And that's probably one of the things we learned too, was it's a spectrum, but it's not a linear spectrum.
Yeah.
Was definitely something. Yeah. Okay. What's something that you learned about yourself through the process?
Something that I've been like looking into lately, and I think it's a big part of this, is that I was a 911 dispatcher for 13 years, and people will tell you in that field that 911 dispatchers are type A personality. Like very like driven, goal-oriented, organized, like they have a method and a mission. Like that's just kind of how it is. And I fit that bill when I'm at work.
Yeah.
But outside of work, in my family life, I'm not type A personality at all.
No.
I did more reading into the different personality types, and I'd say I'm kind of like a hybrid between B and D, which is, I pulled let me kind of give you the, B is more of the intuitor, the promoter, the helper, the direct and supporting, theoretic, like, and then
that tracks.
D type is the supporter, the philosopher, the feeler, the peacemaker and observer. Like I fit all those things like pretty well. And so I realized that I'm two very different people when it comes to work things versus home things. And I handle people differently in those situations. So that I think that's one of the big things I've learned about myself is like I fit a much different role at home.
Yeah. Kind of talking about marriage and meltdowns and miscommunication. Maybe we've already kind of talked about what's one of the harder parts of being married to me, because I know it's not a breeze.
Finding a balance between caring for you and understanding and being like that anchor and that calm and being true to my own emotions and my feelings and situations, I think is a difficult thing to navigate. I think for anybody it would be. And with my personality being a peacemaker and some, like some of those things that I just talked about with the personality types, in those situations with people I care about, it's easy to put my feelings on the back burner to try to make things better for other people. And I have to remember not to be untrue to that.
Yeah.
But I have to find balance and ways to incorporate it that aren't going to make things worse for you either. So,
well, and like that's been an issue for us anyways, is because I don't want you to do that either. Like sometimes when you're trying to make peace to just end the argument, like I don't like that.
Yeah.
I want to have it out. Let's have the argument. Let's deal with it and then move past it. Because one of the things that drives me nuts about my family is that we'd get into a big fight about something. Everyone would go walk away mad. And then the next day you just pretend like it never happened and nothing ever gets resolved.
Yeah.
And so then you have a fight about the same thing again later.
Right.
And I did not want to do that in my family.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the things that was difficult for me. It wasn't that I enjoyed fighting, but I wanted to deal with it.
Yeah.
I wanted to have the argument, have the discussion, and then move on. And you just wanted, like you said, you would put your own thoughts and your own whatever aside to just end the argument. And I'd be like, nope, don't do that.
And that's probably something I learned from being raised around my mom is like, okay, I'm going to put my feelings aside right now to keep the stress level low. And it doesn't work with you. But over time, we've kind of come to a common ground of it's also not good for us to hash things out in the heat of the meltdown or in the middle of my emotions. It's like not good for us. So it's like I've said before, and this probably isn't good blanket advice, but I've said before that when you first get married and people give you the advice to never go to bed angry, I think that's personally for me, I'll say this, because some people live by that advice and some people recommend it and it works for their marriage. That's fine. But I think that advice is crap. I think that sometimes when emotions run high and people get tired, it's not a time to resolve things. So
yeah, if you're like already exhausted, you're probably not going to be able to resolve it.
So like we kind of operate under the assumption of let's get a good night's rest and we can revisit this in the morning. But because of the way that you need things done, it has to be we're going to talk about this tomorrow, or we're going to revisit this, and we actually have to follow through and revisit it because leaving it unresolved is not something that you can do. But yeah, sometimes you just need a good night's sleep and you wake up and you're like, yeah, I was unreasonable, you know?
Well, and there have been times where, like, we also had the rule of, if you don't want to sleep in bed with me, you can go sleep on the couch.
Yeah, you can't kick me out of bed.
Not the other way around. And I remember, like, probably only happened a few times, but most of the time, if I was like, I'm just sleeping on the couch, like, a couple hours into the night, you'd come down and be like, okay, come to bed. You're like, stop being ridiculous. And I'd be like, all right, because this isn't comfortable. You know? And I think I think it probably has to do with people's personalities. If you're the kind of person that's going to wake up just as angry as you went to bed, maybe, I don't know. Like
or some people aren't going to sleep.
Yeah.
And
but
different relationships have different dynamics. So it's not fair for me. In our case,
with the autism, sometimes it's going to bed allows the meltdown to run its course and just come to an end, and then you wake up better anyways, rather than, because understanding the meltdowns now too, we know to not try to, to not try to work it out while I'm still melting down.
No.
Is that it's not going to fix it anyways. It's not going to end the meltdown.
Yeah, and you're not processing.
No.
You're not problem solving on any kind of high level at that point. Your brain is somewhere else and you're like already exhausted.
Yeah. One thing that helped us was the one time I got you to yell at me. And it was like I needed to know that she could get there. She did. Scared the living you-know-what out of me. But
there are very few people in this world who've seen me yell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably you and my ex and the kids, probably. And nobody likes it.
No.
I don't do it very often.
No. It's scary. And it's not scary like you're evil. It's like, holy crap, I pushed her to yelling.
Yeah.
Like, that's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can. If I need to, I can do it.
And it was like comforting and scary at the same time. Like, nope, don't ever want to do that again. But it's nice to know that you can get there, I guess.
Yeah. I guess. I don't know.
So how do you help me during a burnout or a meltdown? And like, what do you wish more people understood about that?
I think that we've said it a lot, is one of the big things is just being there.
And those are kind of two different things. So maybe we need to, like, for a meltdown's different than a burnout.
Yeah.
So in a meltdown, how do you consciously, if you go, okay, he's melting down.
I do the thing where I don't listen to the volume or the tone. I try to listen to what you're actually saying and see things from your point of view. That's one of the biggest things, is like, okay, what got him to this point? What is he saying? Because that's going to give me insight as to where he's at and what got him here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's helpful to me, but also I'm a contemplator, I guess you'd say, in those situations. I need some time and space maybe to process things, to actually figure it, like unravel the puzzle, if you will. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm listening to you and I'm going to acknowledge your feelings in this situation, as long as, I feel like they're valid, just offhand, like, okay. And then take the time to process it, and then come back to it later when I can approach it from, okay, your point of view, and then this is how I saw it, and this is what got us here. This is like what may have caused the issue, or things that may have gone wrong. I think it's, especially in our situation, and I don't know that this is an autistic thing. I think it has more to do with your history, but like, I know that I can't come back to those situations in a way that's going to make you feel like I'm attacking or being accusatory.
Yeah.
Being understanding is more reasonable, but there are situations where I'm like, you were just wrong. And usually after the situation has run its course, if you were just wrong, you're willing to admit you were just wrong.
Yeah.
And it might even be just an aspect of it. Like your information might have been correct, but the way you reacted to it was wrong, or something like that. But you're willing to admit those things usually. So I think that in the meltdown situations, those are the biggest ways I try to help, is I try to see it from your perspective. I try to tune out the noise and give myself a chance to process it, to see how we can actually resolve it so that you can move forward.
I remember, like, I don't think this is just an autism thing, because I can kind of remember in my life when I made the change of, I want to make sure that I'm right, not just act like I am. Because I think there's a lot of people that, if you just act like you're right, you just talk confidently, or loudly or whatever, then they think that they can just convince people that they're right.
Yeah.
I went through a lot of being that way and then feeling dumb when I realized I was wrong and I was acting that way.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. And I remember being in an argument with an ex, and she said, well, every time we argue, you just think you're right. And I remember thinking, well, yeah, why would I be arguing with you if I didn't think I was right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, an autistic thing. Like, when I realized there are people who aren't autistic who will argue just because it's reached that point and they're not going to give up. Like, they're going to go down swinging, even if they realize they're wrong, they're not going to admit it. But for me, it was like, what kind of a lunatic keeps arguing if they think they're wrong? Like, of course I think I'm right. That's why I'm arguing.
Right. Usually the information you have is good, but sometimes it's like the delivery or the way you approached it or something. Or
it didn't quite apply.
Right.
The way, yeah.
Yeah. And you're usually willing to see that after the fact, but if it comes at you in an accusatory way, like the way that I frame things to you is very important. And timing of some conversations, like bringing certain things up at certain times, is useless.
Yeah. Well, and some things is triggering, probably more from my past experience. Like, it is very triggering for me to feel like someone is accusing me of, like, just being malicious, being like a certain way, to be a jerk. I can't think of a time that I've ever been like, I'm just going to do this to be a jerk and just to hurt someone. I can't fathom doing something with the sole purpose and sole goal of hurting anyone, even enemies of mine. I've never been like, I just want to hurt this person, so I'm going to do this. So it is particularly triggering because there's been plenty of people in my past that have done that, and people who still do that.
Yeah.
So it's very triggering to me because that's affected relationships with my kids.
Yeah.
Like, they believe that about me.
Right.
Because of people who actually, they're the ones who are behaving that way.
Yeah.
And so it's particularly triggering to me when it feels like that's that's what I'm being accused of, because I'm like, that's just not me. And it's real easy to convince people who don't know me that that's possible if you can get me to melt down.
Right.
So yeah, all of that is definitely triggering. So that makes sense that.
Well, I mean, I think there's a small handful of times even in our relationship where you've done things to hurt my feelings, and I know you don't do it on purpose. So it's like, I'll try to tell you, that actually hurts my feelings and this is why. And you're always like, whoa, I'm really sorry. That was not my intention, or I didn't realize that doing that would hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
But you never would do it on purpose.
How has our communication changed since the diagnosis? We're kind of like covering a lot of this anyways, aren't we? Like,
yeah. I think it just helps us to kind of understand when and why to talk about things, but also that we have to talk about things. Like, we have to be pretty open and willing to communicate.
Yeah.
I think like we've gotten pretty good at talking about things of all sorts. Like,
well, and the fact that we started out the way we did, like just so open, just here's all of our cards here.
Yeah.
Just put them all on the table. And
yeah.
It was almost like a way of earning each other's trust from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because we had a lot of baggage, both of us.
Yep.
So, I already learned early on that I could lay my baggage out on you and you would just be like, okay, let's deal with it.
Yep.
Not run from it.
Sometimes I carried your bags and sometimes you carried mine.
It's true.
Definitely how it worked. But no, communication is a big piece of what we do to keep being successful. Like we continue to communicate about things.
And we definitely get better and better about that. I think even since we moved out here, of course, we moved out here shortly after I was diagnosed. But even since we've moved out here, it's gotten better to the point where, like, I can better recognize that I'm melting down when I'm melting down.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that I haven't that much control.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I'd be melting down, it would almost be like, okay, I'm out of control now, and that adds more stress and more of a panic of, is this going to cause a problem in our relationship that can't be fixed?
Yeah.
And I think since we've moved out here, that panic isn't an issue for me anymore. It's almost like whatever meltdown I'm going through, I know that like once it runs its course, once we move past it, like we can figure it out, figure it out or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and we kind of always do, and we both have that mindset. And
I think it's important too, because I think some people see our relationship and don't see the arguments. And I think some people think that we have this like idealized relationship, and we don't. We argue, we disagree.
Yep.
We've had blow-ups.
I'm not the Stepford housewife that's just agreeable all the time that people think I am. Like, I'm actually stubborn and have a mind of my own.
That would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
So, like,
I have a mind of my own. I can be stubborn, and I don't put up with crap either. So it's like, I think people underestimate me.
And it's not even like I try to like play it off like every time we have an argument. That's just me melting down. Like,
no.
I mean, sometimes I'm being stubborn and I'm just wrong too. And we figure that out after the fact, but
we've both been wrong before in the last 15 years.
No.
I know.
So like, what does supporting me as an autistic partner like actually look like day to day?
I think just the same as supporting any partner if you're a good partner.
Yeah.
Like, I think that just listening, working on communication, working on understanding the person. One of the things that we may have mentioned this before, but one of the things that we did was learning about each other's love languages and what each other's needs are. And even though my needs are different than your needs, I still can do the things that you need.
Yeah.
So like, just, I don't know. I think it's like a lot like any other relationship, but with the added element of, okay, this is something that you struggle with or you have to deal with, so we have to deal with, and understanding it.
Yeah. Again, I kind of feel like, I've said it before, like that's like in the difference, I think, is that to you, you're like, I'm just supporting you the way I should anyways.
Yeah.
And again, like now you know that the reason you have to support certain things or do certain things for me is because I'm autistic. Like you were supportive anyways.
Yeah.
And that is the difference. And that's kind of the thing that I say a lot on posts and stuff, is that you didn't have to know I was autistic.
Yeah.
To treat me the right way and to support me the right way and to just understand, you couldn't put a label on those traits and you couldn't put a label on the reason I behaved the way I did, but you just figured out who I was pretty much anyways.
Yeah.
And, supported me appropriately.
Well, and I think one of the big things about being in a marriage is understanding you're autistic, but I'm not your parent. I'm your partner. So once it comes to a point where you're parenting or trying to control the person or tell them how to live their life, like I was never here to change you or control you. So I just feel like that's the nature of a good partnership.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you get to the point where you're doing that, then something's wrong and you got to redirect and figure that out. Or if it gets to the point where that's what the relationship is, then
that's not healthy.
Maybe you don't have a partnership, So just keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
I'm not your parent, I'm your partner.
Again, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but how do you balance supporting me while taking care of yourself?
It's a constant effort. Sometimes I'm not very good at it. I think it's kind of like a roller coaster. Sometimes I I put myself on the back burner and put everybody else first for a while. And then I realize, okay, I'm neglecting myself. So then I turn my focus back to that. And it's a give and take. And sometimes I'm not very good at it, but
I almost feel like we've both done that back and forth
for sure
throughout our
we
marriage.
Definitely
too.
have.
Like there's times when we focus on the other one or on the whole family and kind of and sometimes we are consciously doing that. Like, okay, we have to, I have to put the focus on that. Like going
and it's
through
okay
school
to do that
and
sometimes.
all the stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's okay to do that sometimes because sometimes one of you is going to need more support than the other.
And it's helpful knowing that the other one is going to try to be there to take up the slack. Too.
Yeah, for sure.
What surprised you most after learning more about autism?
I don't know that there was a most surprised. I think I learned so much and I'm still learning so much. It's just the whole different levels of different places on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Everybody is different. And
I think sometimes both of us surprised, we'll learn something else that we'll realize is connected to the autism. Some things autistic people tend to have stomach issues more than other people.
Yeah.
And it's oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, we've always known I've had stomach issues. We just never connected that to
autism.
Me being autistic.
Yeah.
So that's probably something that fits in there.
Yeah.
To answer the question for you.
No, that's a good, sometimes you remember examples of things better than I do. So.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say to someone whose partner was just diagnosed autistic later in life?
Learn as much as you can. Just be open to learning. If you're a reader, read books, articles, just do your research. I am not. So I did a lot of my research by learning from you. And I did read some stuff online, but as far as books go, you did most of the book reading and we talked about it a lot.
And there's good resources on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
You can find videos from, autistic organizations, actually autistic people. I watched a lot of different videos from actually autistic people that gave me a lot of insight and stuff.
Yeah. But just be willing to learn, be patient. A big one is it's not something that you're going to navigate overnight. And even just allowing you to go through the process of, okay, now I have this diagnosis. What all does it mean? And reprocessing your life. And to be pretty patient through that process and kind of let you go through it and feel it and be there to support you.
Yeah.
And then see where we were at. Okay, now we've done this. What are we doing?
Right.
Where are we at?
Right.
So just being patient and being supportive and just figuring out what that looks like.
If you could go back in time and tell your younger self one thing about this journey, what would it be?
Probably to do it again and trust yourself. I don't know. I think that everything that we've been through is worth it because of where we're at.
Yeah.
And that I can trust myself in the process and okay, you're strong enough to do this. You're capable of doing this and
Kind of just it's going to be okay.
Yep.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We both talked about that, especially like where we're at now of not wanting to go back and change something, because then it's like, okay, well, how would that change everything else?
Yep.
You know, maybe part of that's because of my nerd brain that's like, well, you changed one thing in the past and it,
separates into a parallel universe.
Yeah. What makes you proud of us going through all of this together?
Just that we're both willing to put in the effort. I think that, like, people say marriage is 50-50, and it's not 50-50. It's like, as long as a partnership, you're putting in 100% of effort all the time. Sometimes I'm going to be putting in 60% and you're going to be putting in 40%, and sometimes vice versa. And sometimes I only have 5% and you have 95%. Like, that's just kind of how it works. And I mean, I think that as long as we're putting in equal effort, but not necessarily at the same time.
You have to be willing to make up for what the other one can't do at the time.
Even with the challenges that you face and the challenges that I face with my MS, we both put in the same amount of effort, I think, into our relationship and our family and our well-being. Like, all of it in general, I think we both put in pretty equal amounts.
Yeah, I think so too. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that kind of wraps up where we're at. Hopefully that can give somebody who's going through this as a neuroanchor some inspiration, even if it's just, okay, I'm not the only one, who's dealt with that. I'm not the only one who's going through this.
Well, and I kind of wanted to just say that I'm aware that my personality type and the way that I handle stress and the way that I handle situations is not necessarily the standard or the norm. Right. Like, people get emotional about things and people get worked up about things, and that's okay. But you have to take a step back and look at yourself and look at your situation and figure out how to navigate that. It doesn't mean you have to navigate it the same way we do. It means that you need to put in the effort to learn about yourself and the way that you learn and the way that you process and the way that you communicate and what your relationship needs, and put in the effort to figure that out for you. I think that that's important because we're not all the same. Right. Even us neurotypical people are not the same.
Right.
And my personality might be such that I can be patient and calm in these situations, but not everybody necessarily can.
Right.
So figure out what that looks like for you. And that's okay that you're not the same.
Yeah.
And you don't have to try to change to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
So.
For sure. Yeah. And as always, if you have a question about anything we've talked about, if you just want to express that you can relate, anything like that, leave us a comment.
We love hearing from you guys
on any of our, whether it's on a Facebook page, on any of the podcast sites, on YouTube, wherever you listen to this, wherever you interact with us. Yeah, don't hesitate to leave a comment and or to ask us a question. You can send us messages through Facebook, anything, and we'll get back to you one way or another.
Yep. As soon as we're able to.
Yep. And obviously, like this episode, subscribe. If you're getting this from a podcast site, downloading it helps us. It also, you can listen to it if you're not connected to the internet. So downloads.
Download a few episodes for your next drive or flight or whatever the case may be.
For sure.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have planned what the next episode's going to be, so I'm not sure we can even tease that, can we?
Maybe not.
I guess not. Well, there you go.
Next week, we're going to have a surprise for you.
There you go. Might be a surprise for us, too. But no, I think that wraps up this episode pretty good, and we will see you guys next week with whatever we decide to talk about.
Yep. Have a good week.
We'll see you. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for diagnosis or treatment of autism or related condition.